The Holy Gospel as it is recorded in Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside. And after he sat down and the disciples had gathered around, Jesus began to teach them. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who are mourning. They will be consoled. Blessed are those who are gentle. They will inherit the land. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. They will have their fill. Blessed are those who show mercy to others. They will be shown mercy. Blessed are those whose hearts are clean. They will see God. Blessed are those who work for peace. They will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of their struggle for justice. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. You are fortunate when others insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of slander against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, for your reward in heaven is great. They persecuted the prophets before you in the very same way. The Gospel of Christ. Please be seated. She had no family. She lived alone. And for the purposes of this sermon, I will call her Sophia. Sophia, the Greek word for wisdom. I became her pastor because she knew somebody who used to be a member here at Holy Cross, and when the doctors told her that she was dying, she thought she ought to have a pastor. I was summoned to her bedside. I hadn't been a pastor for very long, and so I was afraid. I had been told that she only had a few weeks before the cancer would take her. Not that she would die, but that the cancer would take her. No one used the word death or said that she was going to die. To be present to a stranger when they are so close to death is a daunting task. No time for gentle hellos, no time to warm up to one another slowly. Just a long, painful, and sometimes awkward goodbye. I went to Sophia's bedside every day. Some days, when she was able, the questions, they just tumbled out of her. She wanted to know what I believed. No pat answers or trite platitudes, if you please, just the facts. Now, I liked her no-nonsense approach, even though I knew that the meager facts that I possessed might not sustain her on her journey. It didn't take long for me to figure out that she'd spent a great deal of time in the church. Her parents saw to it that she was raised in the church, but a lifetime of tragedy and heartache had led her far away from the faith that she had grown up with. But as death drew near, she longed for the certainty of her youth. She'd like to believe. It would be nice to think that there would be a place for her. Not exactly heaven per se, but someplace heavenly, perhaps like Paris in the springtime. She so loved Paris in the springtime. If only heaven were full of cafes or patisseries where she could while away the hours talking with others who appreciate the finer things of life. Life. Would there be life beyond death? She'd like to believe so. One morning I stopped by the bakery that Edward had on Main Street, and I picked up the most Parisian-looking pastries that I could find, and then I swung by a coffee shop and had them grind some fresh beans for us. And as I brewed coffee in Sophia's kitchen, the aroma wafted up the stairs, and she shouted down to me and asked me to heat up some milk so that we could have lattes. It was as heavenly a breakfast as we could muster. Our conversation took us back to Paris and to springtime before I was born, when Sophia was young and she was beautiful and the men were all falling at her feet. Some of her stories actually made me blush. We laughed and laughed and laughed until we cried. And after Paris, we traveled to London by way of some excellent fish and chips and a few glasses of beer. It was cold and wet in London. Sophia managed to complete her nursing studies, even though a certain young man begged her to give up her work and come and be his love. Over sausages and beer, we traveled to Hamburg, where Sophia fell in love with an orphanage full of refugee children. By the time our conversations took us to India, Sophia was far too ill to enjoy a curry. So we sipped tea as we wept over the stories of poverty and disease in India. One afternoon, I arrived to find Sophia's care worker crushing ice for mint juleps, no less. And it took me a while to figure out that we were going deep into the southern United States, where Sophia had worked long and hard to help establish a medical center among the poorest Americans. By the time our travels led us back to Newmarket, Sophia was growing weak, and I had gone from being a suspected Bible thumper to a trusted traveling companion. The most difficult part of our journey lay before us. "What will become of me?" Sophia pleaded. I told her that the doctors would see to it that there would be no pain, but that wasn't what she was talking about. What will become of me? Will there just be darkness, or will I see a bright light? I don't know, was all I could honestly say. Sophia was patient with me. She asked me if I thought there was more to life or if death was the end. No religious platitudes, please, just the facts. I don't know, Sophia. I believe that we live and die in God, and that God is love, and in love we have nothing to fear. All will be well. I trust that in death we fall into the love that is God. Sophia took my hand and she confessed, "I am afraid." And I didn't know how to comfort her. So I asked her, "What are you afraid of, Sophia?" "Not of dying. Good God, no. I'm not afraid of dying," Sophia insisted. "I'm afraid of being forgotten. Who will remember me?" Yesterday, I was struggling with this sermon. I'd been reading about our gospel text for hours and hours, trying to figure out exactly what to say about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, especially about the line that kept jumping out at me. "Blessed are those who are mourning, they will be consoled." Some translations say, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Mourning has fallen out of fashion these days. People don't like to talk about mourning. They'd rather celebrate a life than mourn a death. Blessed are those who are mourning, they will be consoled. Blessed. Blessed. What does it mean to say blessed? The Greek word makarios, that is often translated as blessed, is also often translated as happy. But happy are those who are mourning is not a translation that makes much sense. There's another meaning to the Greek word, which does make some sense. Honored. Honored are those who mourn, for they shall be consoled. Honored are those who mourn. To mourn is to grieve, to lament, to show sorrow for the death of someone or the loss of something. There is much in this life to mourn, losses of all sorts. For life is filled with change, and in change there are losses. But these days we don't really honor those who mourn their losses. These were the thoughts that I was struggling with yesterday when I decided to go out for a walk to clear my head and hopefully find the sermon somewhere. As I walked, I noticed a phenomenon that has intrigued me ever since I moved to Ontario. Have you ever noticed that some leaves hang on the trees, even in winter? They hang there until spring, when new growth pushes them off. And yesterday there were trees with these shriveled up, dried leaves on them. Despite all the ravages of winter, they're dangling there. Most leaves have long since fallen and have been transformed into mulch, and when spring does come, they will feed new growth. But not these stubborn leaves. As dry and withered as they appear, they are quite beautiful. And as I marveled at their tenacity, I remembered Sophia laughing as she hung on for dear life. And I remembered how I wept each time I left her bedside. And I also remembered other griefs, other losses that I have been privileged to mourn. For love is the prerequisite to mourning. We do not mourn unless we have loved or been loved. Honored are those who mourn, for we shall be comforted, because every tear is pregnant with new life. All that we are is not lost at our death. What we are forever impacts the whole in whom we live and move and have our being. Death is a transformation point into the mystery, who is, was, and evermore shall be the source of all being. For those of us who mourn, grief is a narrow passage through which we pass from death to new life. Without tears and dreams, there is no healing. Without laughter and singing, there is no savoring of what is, was, and is to come. Love is the tender life force that transcends even death. Honored are those who mourn, for it is love itself who consoles, the love that is the source of all being. Over and over again, Sophia's desperate plea, "Who will remember me?" punctuated our conversations with fear that went beyond belief. No theological words or phrases about believing would suffice. Only the promise to remember her could bring any comfort. But who was I to make such a promise? So I hesitated. I tried to calm her fears with words. I tried to explain her fear away. And then one afternoon, Sophia took my hand and asked me about my travels, my loves, my hopes, my dreams, and my fears. She said she wanted to be able to remember me. Now, I was reluctant. This wasn't supposed to be about me. I was a pastor, after all. I was the caregiver. And there are lines in those books that we read when we're preparing to be caregivers, lines that we are not supposed to cross. Sophia didn't care to be cautious. Time was of the essence. She wanted to remember me, and to do that, she needed to know me. So I came out from under the protection of my clerical office, and together we traveled back to the places that had shaped and molded me. And Sophia and I, we became friends. If only for a brief moment in time, we were kin, each embodying love for the other. A few days before she died, a panic came over her as she feared what was to become of her. And once more, holding tightly to my hand, she begged me, "Will you remember me?" And with all my heart, I promised, I will remember you. I will remember you. Those men in Paris who fell at your feet all those years ago. The young man who fell in love with you in London. The children in Hamburg. The people in Kentucky. They will remember you. Your friends will remember you. And then I took a long, deep breath and I said, I will remember you. And her breathing calmed and her grip loosened and she began to smile. And then I asked her, will you remember me? I will remember you, she promised. And over the course of the next few days, as her death drew near, Sophia and I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that we were kin. Embodying the divine for one another, loving one another, remembering one another. I remember you, my dear. I remember you. And yesterday, as snow began to fall, I saw the leaves in winter hanging on. And I remembered you. And it is an honor to remember you. You are part of me. And now you are part of all these fine people here. All these fine people who are blessed to have people of your own to remember. Spring will come. The sap will rise. New leaves from buds will transform all our grief into hope. Blessed are we. All that we are is not lost at our death. What we are forever impacts the whole, the one who is love, the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Blessed are we. Thanks be to the one who makes us whole, the one who is our lover, beloved, and love itself, now and always. Amen.